It's very clear that Donald Trump is mad about these attacks, about Project 2025, because it seems as though they have been effective. But the reality is that a lot of the policies in this 900-page document, they do, in fact, overlap with what Donald Trump has said on the campaign trail. So make it make sense for us.
Well, Simone, I think if you study Donald Trump at all, you see he really never likes to back down, never likes to admit a mistake. And he's running from this as fast as someone his age could run. And so I think that shows it's a tell that they've probably got research showing that this is taking on water. But this is his blueprint. It's very consistent with what he ran on in 2016 and tried to do as president. It's very consistent with what he's talked about doing in this campaign. Obviously, it was written and designed by people who worked in his administration, who want to work in this administration. So if anything, he's just drawing more attention to it. And we live in a world where everything's on the internet. We live in a world where people can research who's behind this. We live in a world where his running mate is probably the biggest supporter of Project 2025. So I hope and expect the Harris campaign to continue to lay this out as this is what Donald Trump will do. Let's compare that to what I would do, Kamala Harris, on a suite of issues. This is what Donald Trump said he will do. The other thing about this is Trump will get angrier and angrier the more that he realizes this isn't going away. And that's always useful, I think, when it relates to him, because destabilizing him is not that hard. And it also throws him even more off his game.
Yeah, he's off balance, off kilter, and even more off message when these things pop up. You know, Stuart, the Washington Post reports that while the policy arm of Project 2025 is winding down, and I just want to reiterate that the document is already out there, so there's not more policy to do, really. Another key part of Project 2025 is staying alive, and that is his personnel database. It has more than 20,000 potential applicants for a Trump administration that would be loyal to him. What does this tell you?
Well, I mean, look, there's a certain kind of Saturday Night Live sketch quality about this. Donald Trump is proving that he doesn't have anything to do with Project 2025 by firing the head of Project 2025. I mean, it's really ridiculous.
A hit dog will holler, as my grandmother used to say.
Yeah, you know, this is the kind of thing the Chinese used to do. They'd like take somebody's picture out and say that person doesn't exist anymore. You know, what I really thought was telling about this also was this threatening statement by Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles, like, this is what's going to happen to you if you threaten to, you know, try to represent the Trump campaign. I mean, look, this is sort of mascot stealing high school level taunts. This Project 2025 is a creation of Trumpism. It is the embodiment of Trumpism. He just looked at everybody in America who's qualified to be vice president legally. He picked the guy who was the biggest supporter of Project 25, J.D. Vance. So, you know, I would say this is the policy equivalent of I didn't inhale. And I just don't think that anybody's going to buy it.
Stuart, I love you. I mean, truly, it's such a good illustration. You mentioned J.D. Vance, so let's talk about him. Politico is reporting that despite his very rough start as a running mate, Donald Trump is counting on Vance to lead the attack against Vice President Harris. Now, David, what do you make of this move? I mean, I laugh a little bit because you have to laugh to keep from crying here, because J.D. Vance has made headlines for saying just weird things, and they have become the main point of attack against the guy at the top of the ticket, Donald Trump, in this whole campaign. Like, it's like, did they even vet him at all?
Well, he had a lot of other choices, and he chose this. He'll probably end up on the record blaming his sons for it, if reports are to be believed. But listen, we know historically the vice presidential pick, I think it is the most overcovered story in politics in terms of how it relates to voter behavior. It generally doesn't drive vote unless you make a mistake. And so J.D. Vance is already the most unpopular vice presidential pick in the history of recorded polling this far after he was selected. And so it's a distraction for Trump because Trump will be the oldest nominee in the history of American politics. It is a valid question whether people would like J.D. Vance to be their president if something were to happen to Trump. So I think at the end of the day, it's gone about as badly as you could have imagined. And, you know, Vance, obviously, if he has a good debate, that's the most important thing a vice presidential pick does in the campaign, is to try and prosecute that debate well. You know, perhaps he can right the ship, but I don't think so. And I think folks are just getting started on all his last statements. And he's not running away from anything. Apparently, you know, he kind of apologized to Katz, not to the women he offended. So listen, what you find is this is a really it's a tough stage to inhabit, okay, for anybody. The political graveyard is littered with people who we thought would be great presidential candidates who got chewed up, by some vice presidential candidates who couldn't handle it. I think J.D. Vance hasn't even been in the Senate for 2 years. I think he's definitely suffering under the spotlight. You compare that, by the way, to Kamala Harris, who, yes, she's been vice president, but she's never had a spotlight like this. And in the last 9 days, I think she's traversed it about as well as we've seen in recent political history.
One could argue perhaps J.D. Vance, Stuart, agrees with David's assertion and his analysis of Vice President Harris, because he has said that the Washington Post reports that he was recorded, J.D. Vance, at a weekend event telling donors that Harris becoming the nominee made the race more challenging for Trump, calling it a political sucker punch. Now, Donald Trump likely won't be impressed with that headline. Stuart, have you ever just heard or even seen a running mate have so many missteps 2 weeks after being picked? I can think of one person I'm sure we're all thinking of, but other than that, your thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, I think the political consultant side of me would like a constitutional amendment to prohibit candidates from saying anything on the record that he think is off the record in fundraising events. Because they tend to say things that they wish they hadn't said. Look, J.D. Vance is sort of an accidental figure in American politics. He's a creation of Peter Thiel. The only reason he won the primary was because Peter Thiel, who is a very weird guy, came in and spent $15 million. And then when he was on the ballot after he won the nomination, he underperformed the top of the ticket by 400,000 votes. Which, I mean, think about it. That's really hard to do. 400,000 people voted for a Republican governor and didn't vote for J.D. Vance. He's made a living out of saying these odd things in these various podcasts and different interviews. And it's like nobody went through this. You know, I think he's not very likable. And really, the heart of it is it's always struck me as a not very confident choice, because he is a base choice. And if you really think politically that you have your base locked down, why in the world would you pick a guy like J.D. Vance, who, has this problem with the 19th Amendment, apparently? So, yeah, I don't think it's going well. And I think that Trump hates people who he feels are making him look bad. And that's going to be Vance, and it's going to be the campaign that went along with his pick.
Well, we are going to definitely be watching. To Stuart's point, I mean, the Trump campaign has said that this was that they think that they can expand the map to places like Minnesota and Arizona, but I don't know if J.D. Vance does that.